Who are you?
You held a gun to my wife's head. She was terrified.
This is a joke, I don't get it.
It's not a joke.
She takes a few pictures of him, and he finally stops running as the car speeds up. Afterward, he arrives at the CIA, where he works as a decoder, a very intelligent one at that. Just as the saying goes, being nice can get one used. Heller faces this problem at work with the Bear, a secret agent. At his office, an external anonymous chat comes in, and Inquiline, the sender, sends a document of the embassy leadership summit with the instruction to open a loan. Heller has been trying to guess where Inquiline stays for 5 years now, but has still not cracked it. However, Inquiline tells him to be careful with the data, because it's highly compromising for the agency, before ending the chat. After lunch, he receives a call from Sarah, who lets him know she's arrived in London.
I'm just calling to let you know I'm here.
Right, I know I tracked you.
Well, he already knows this because he tracked her, and promises to call back later since he's busy with the data. After dropping the call, he takes his laptop to the server room in order to access the data, and comes across highly classified information about a suicide bomber and drone strikes, which airs on the news and has taken lives, though it seems the data was deleted and amended by the approval of Chief Moore from the Academy. While heading out, he comes across his friend Carlos and confides that he may have looked into some files he shouldn't have. Since their work focuses only on binary, Carlos advises him to keep quiet about anything he's discovered. Later that evening at home, he gives Sarah a call, but it goes to voicemail, making him drop a message. The next morning, Heller arrives at work as usual, but is surprised to see Chief Moore in his office. When Chief Moore learns that he hasn't been tracking the news, he takes him to see the director. Heller is a bundle of nerves when they arrive at Director O'Brien's office, and she goes straight to the point. It turns out there was a situation in London, an attack at the Christopher Street Hotel, where Sarah is lodged. With so much sadness, Moore tells him Sarah has been eliminated. Heller refuses to believe this, making Moore turn on the news. It was a hostage situation, where 4 assailants stormed the hotel and took a number of hostages. 2 sadly lost their lives, one of which is an American woman. Heller still refuses to believe since the news doesn't say Sarah's name, but after he's shown the CCTV they got from the hotel, he sees Sarah being taken away. The sight of this breaks him, and he is taken home by Carlos. Reporters and the police are already packed outside his property, but Carlos manages to get him in without talking to anyone. Inside, he numbly watches the news, declining all calls. The next morning, Heller goes to Moore's office to ask for more information, but Moore and Caleb, who's in charge of the investigation, don't really divulge anything important. Moore promises to tell him what they can, as soon as they can, urging him to go home and take some time off. Back home, he just sits outside and stares at the house, hallucinating about Sarah. The once lively house that held his soulmate has now turned gray. The next morning, he arrives at the airport where Sarah's body is transported back, and he signs off the documents as her next of kin. At home, he opens her suitcase and finds a puzzle gift with a letter she wrote for him, which makes him burst into tears of deep anguish. After staring into space for several hours, he uses his house system to browse about the London attack and sees several posts, including one of Sarah. Sometime later, he heads to work. His mission, the server room. He quickly gets access to the cameras of the hotel. He succeeds in making a report of what happened, learning when the suspects arrived and the stolen van they used with their prints and DNA wiped off. They had a meeting with Impact Investments out of Indonesia, and that's when it all started. Something heated happened, making one of the 4 suspects shoot the 2 Impact security. One lost his life instantly, and the other was in a critical condition. The hotel security was alerted, and the police called. In a race to leave the building, the suspects decided to grab some insurance, and only took Sarah because she tried to save someone else. From a voice analysis, Heller finds out that the man who took Sarah is Mishka Blažić. Another suspect is Lawrence Ellish, ex-Special Forces who handles shipments for the wider group. Armed police and security were arriving, but were forced to stand down due to the hostages already taken. The area was sealed off by the police, but the suspects knew they were exposed, and that was when Sarah was shot. Her killer was hard to track because he said nothing, but Heller successfully manages to get an ID. The man is Horst Schiller, who has loose affiliations with dozens of mercs and defense groups. They seem to be operating as an interface between bad state actors and terrorist entities, all business, and they keep getting hired. However, for this hire, Heller has gotten a location. Gretchen Frank, former Armenian IO, who is in Paris and buys bread at a particular cafe regularly. It seems Caleb and Moore already know about Gretchen, making Heller confused as to why they haven't taken any action. In their defense, they want the whole network, because it has to do with the sovereignty and security of the country. Moore suggests Heller sees the therapist, Dr. Garrison, since it's clear the loss has taken a toll on him. During therapy, Garrison makes him talk about his feelings, and he admits he feels useless, guilty, and extremely angry. If only he had followed her to London when she asked, or if he had spoken to her well when she called, maybe things would have been different. He's angry at the agency because they aren't doing their job even after he's given the names of Sarah's murderers. Garrison tells him Sarah is gone, and he's the only one who can make things better for himself by coming to terms with that fact. This instills a decision into Heller, and when he arrives at work the next morning, he places a microchip inside the clip of his access card. Inside, the chip isn't detected by the cameras, and he quickly accesses the mission report from the data Inquilin sent. Inquilin tries sending another message, but Heller shuts the system down, not having the patience to wait and discuss Inquilin's location. That evening, he goes to a bar. Taking the printed files the next morning, he heads over to Moore's office, calling him out on his fraudulent activities and showing him the printed evidence. He threatens to take it to O'Brien or even the press, but Caleb tells him he'll go to jail. Knowing he's playing with fire, Heller tells them that he set up a dead man switch, so if he doesn't code in every 5 hours, the files will automatically be sent to 3 top investigative journalists. 24 hours later, it will be released to the public, and this will be effective if they try to do anything at all to him. The only thing Heller wants is to find and end the men who took his wife's life. Moore and Caleb find this extremely funny, but Heller is serious. He wants the training of the CIA and all information the agency has on the men. He also wants cash and a new identity. Moore continues joking about this, but Heller seriously tells him he wants a fighting chance. Inside his car, the adrenaline leaves him, making him throw up. Meanwhile, Moore and Caleb are clearly shaken up by Heller. Caleb suggests playing along with the training till they're sure about the switch. If it doesn't exist, well, a training accident could always be possible. Moore agrees and decides to use Colonel Henderson. Heller arrives at the training camp and is received by Henderson. Meanwhile, CCTV investigations are already ongoing back in the agency as to how he must have gotten access to the files. After sending all the decoders on a break, Moore and Caleb lead a team to ransack every bit of the space, checking for a skimmer Heller must have used.
Think he used a skimmer?
They don't work on these drives. Screener picked up nothing.
Maybe he swallowed it.
Still would have picked it.
In camp, Heller's first training is in the shooting range, but he barely hits the target. Even when Henderson brings him a few steps closer, he still misses. Seems like he really has a long way to go in this field. He only succeeds when he almost chest to board with the range. The investigation is taken to Heller's home and they begin checking everywhere and everything. Heller finally puts his skills to use when the creating a weapon part of the training begins, even shocking Henderson at how fast he makes something. Moore realizes Heller went to the bar twice and decides to check that place also. Henderson drills Heller's new identity into him, pressure forcing him to answer every question. Afterwards, a new passport is created for him. Caleb and his team find nothing useful at the bar except for a disc. Later that night, Henderson pays Heller a visit in his room, telling him he's not a killer.
You are not a killer.
The pictures of Sarah's killers fall from the bed, making Henderson wonder how Heller plans to take them all out. Heller doesn't have any plans, hence the reason he needs Henderson to teach him. Henderson pulls out his gun, unloads the safety, and forces Heller to take it.
Take it! Aye, now! Pointed at my chest.
Henderson makes him point the gun at his chest, urging Heller to pull the trigger on him. However, Heller just can't seem to do this. Henderson tells him he has to either be very confident or very stupid to be able to pull it off. Heller doesn't have that confidence, and he's neither stupid. Henderson feels that no matter how much training he gets, he can't be made into something he's not. Afterward, Heller listens to the voice recording of Moore and Caleb, hearing them talk about breaking his encryption on the disk. After several hours, Agent Ali calls Caleb, telling him she got access, and Heller's switch is just a bluff. They realize they've been played, and they decide to take Heller to join his wife. Henderson is called and given the order, but when he enters Heller's room to eliminate him, he finds the space empty. Henderson reports back to Moore, sharing that Heller now has several passports. He even hacked the biometrics and got out on a janitor's card. Moore finds the bug Heller hid in the file clip, but Heller is already on a flight to London. On the plane, Heller reminisces about a memory with Sarah and the plane she got him as a gift for his birthday. His passport is cleared at immigration, and he heads for Paris. The agency gets this update, and Caleb suggests involving local liaison, but Moore refuses, insisting everything stays with them. In Paris, Heller gets a hotel close to the cafe Gretchen visits and begins decoding when he sees her. That evening, he heads over to her apartment and manages to pick the lock through the guide of a YouTube tutorial. He begins looking around, taking pictures. When he takes the gun he sees in the drawer, he notices that Gretchen has entered the building through the tracker on his phone. Afraid of being caught, he begins to panic but manages to come outside the door. With shaky hands, he points the gun as the voice continues drawing close, almost sending him into a frenzy. Thankfully, the person enters into another apartment and doesn't see him at all. He immediately rushes out of the building and heads back to his hotel, breathing heavily like he just fought World War II. He begins hallucinating about Sarah, which makes him a bit calm. He then continues his tracking, discovering the location of a clinic Gretchen visits. The next day, Heller purchases a huge amount of sunflowers and lilies before going to visit the clinic. The system suddenly shut down, Heller's doing, of course, making the doctor go out to solve the issue. This gives Heller the leverage to slip into the room unnoticed, and he locks the door. He also locks the transparent box where Gretchen is doing some health-related exercise and begins infusing pollen from the flowers into the box. She instantly begins choking, but he tries to pry out answers from her, asking about Horst. However, the doctor notices something is wrong and realizes the door has been locked from the inside. Gretchen refuses to cooperate, making Heller infuse more pollen. She starts talking, but he's unable to hear her because of the commotion outside and how weak her voice is. Left with no other choice, he opens the box, but what greets him is a strong push, as Gretchen tries to escape. After much scuffle where she overpowers him despite her weak state, she manages to escape, but Heller also follows suit. While running out of the building, she doesn't look properly at the road and a car suddenly hits her down. This instantly draws people's attention, but Heller manages to sneak away with her phone before running off like his life depends on it. Back in his hotel, he begins packing since he can no longer stay in the area. He heads to the bus station and pays for a ticket to Marseille. On the bus, he can't help but see flashes of Sarah's last moments on Earth. At the agency, O'Brien asks Moore about information on Gretchen, having seen the report. Moore lies that one of her own people ran her down, pinning it on a fallout from when the London job went south. She tells him the French ambassador is asking, but he dismissively says it wasn't them. When Heller arrives, he heads to a club for some drinks to clear his head, but the memory of Gretchen getting hit keeps playing. Walking through the crowd feeling drunk, he sees Sarah dancing, but realizes it isn't Sarah after some seconds. However, he sees Henderson stalking and walking towards him, which makes him run for his life. There's only one reason Henderson is there. Heller manages to run into another bar, thinking he's escaped Henderson. Unfortunately, Henderson also appears there, making Heller run into the toilet. Seeing no means of escape, he comes out of his own free will and joins Henderson, who's drinking. Henderson orders a drink for him. Heller wonders how he was found, and Henderson reveals it was through Gretchen's phone. It just doesn't matter how good a plan is when panic is involved. Henderson admits Heller surprised him, but tells him everything ends there. He apologizes, but Heller understands, praising him for being a good teacher. However, Heller shocks Henderson when he pulls out a handmade timer, causing a smoke explosion in the bar. Everyone begins running for safety, and Heller makes his flawless escape, leaving Henderson confused. In the early hours of the morning, Heller drops a message for Inquilin, asking for help to meet him at his location. Inquilin tells him to check his voicemail in 1 hour. The message comes, and Heller does as instructed, following a cargo plane to Istanbul. Inquilin drops another message, telling him to go to a particular cafe, where he would pass him a book. He arrives and begins scanning the faces of the people around. When he sends a message, he notices that a man's phone beeps, and he stands to approach the man but is stopped by a woman. She turns out to be Inquilin, surprising Heller, who thought Inquilin was a man. She hands him a book, telling him to check his phone before leaving. He then heads out, and she meets him up along the road. She admonishes him for coming to Istanbul, then makes him put his backpack and cap inside a bag to make him look less American. He tells her about Sarah, but she already knows, coupled with the incident in Paris. He wants her help in finding the others, but Inquilin tells him to go shopping, then meet her in a specific parking garage in half an hour. He does as instructed, and she drives off with him afterwards. He wonders how long she's been Inquilin, and she reveals it's been 6 years. Her husband was a CIA asset, and he was Inquilin until he passed. It turns out he was actually murdered, so she decided to put everything he taught her into use, in order to keep her connection to the agency in case she needed help. She takes him to her house, admitting it's the first place she stayed in for more than a month. She doesn't sleep, but she doesn't want to run anymore. Heller wonders what makes her think she won't be found, and she pulls out a gun, which she's keeping for when they come. Though it isn't for the Russians, it's for her. With her system, she brings out the details of the 3 men, and Heller fills her in on their supposed roles and habits. With just a picture Mishka posted online, Heller successfully detects his location through the vineyard, sun angle, and church building in the background. He even gets the picture of his girlfriend from the shadows, and Inquilin runs a database bringing her profile up. Heller is really more than a genius at this point. Meanwhile, Moore is still fixated on Heller, knowing he'll be after the 3 men. After her speech, O'Brien meets up with Moore in a restaurant, wanting to know where he stands. She urges him to stop playing his black ops in the sand and be accountable to her. She wants to know everything, but Moore tells her that her predecessors took him to the same restaurant, giving him the same speech as her. He tells her what he told them, assuring her she has his full support. She then leaves, entering into her car. Her agent shows her a picture of Henderson, revealing he's in Madrid by Moore's orders. Thinking fast, she decides to get someone from her own side in play. Inquilin finally tracks Mishka to his live location, checking in at a hotel, and Heller decides to go, though knowing that Langley would be tracking Mishka too. He shows her a picture of Henderson, telling her to keep an eye out for him because it's who they would send. Afterward, Heller arrives at the hotel in Madrid, locating Mishka, who's swimming privately on the rooftop. Heller already knows everything about the magnificent rooftop pool from research, and Inquilin suggests he shoots Mishka from a vantage point. Well, it's already been established that Heller can't shoot at anything unless he comes chest to chest. Meanwhile, Moore orders Henderson to find and bury Heller. The next morning, Heller takes a machine by the river and begins setting it up. He then discreetly follows Mishka, overhearing his conversation with the staff about the pool. Unfortunately, Henderson is already in the hotel. Heller notices that a man has been following him, and he draws Inquilin's attention to it. However, before she can confirm his identity from her system, she notices Henderson and tells Heller. She also gets an ID on the other man, revealing that he's also CIA. She urges him to leave since it's become too dangerous, but Heller refuses, insisting on going as planned. Evening comes quickly, and Heller goes to meet Mishka in the pool. He asks about Horst, revealing the situation with Sarah. To instill fear, he shows a remote, telling Mishka that a push on the button will make the glass scatter, because he's attached a machine that has been decompressing the air for several hours. It's either he confesses or swims really fast. Mishka chooses the latter, leaving Heller no choice but to press the button. Immediately, the glass begins cracking, and in a matter of seconds, the pool, which is 16 stories above the ground, comes crashing down, including Mishka. Just then, Inquilin notices that Henderson is headed Heller's way, and warns him, directing him on the paths to follow. The other agent almost catches him in the basement, but Heller barely escapes. Henderson and the agent begin fighting, while Heller watches from the door. As fate would have it, they both end up taking each other's lives. And Heller successfully escapes. At the agency, O'Brien summons Moore, asking about Heller. He lies that he's still on leave and excuses himself from her office. Through the surveillance, Caleb notices that Heller was talking to someone, and with the help of Carlos and Ali, he learns about Inquilin. Back in Istanbul, Heller feeds Inquilin's birds, and she begins talking about the silence one feels when a loved one is taken away. Heller knows this feeling so well, and she tells him every day is just about filling the silence. She feels he should ask himself if getting revenge is how he would fill his, but Heller doesn't know the answer to that. The information on Inquilin's husband is brought out, and they learn that his widow has been controlling his account. Caleb orders to get in contact with the Russian chief in Istanbul. At night, Inquilin walks up to Heller's bed, asking him to hold her so she can sleep next to him for just one night. He agrees, needing the company too. However, their peace is broken by the sound of the birds, and Inquilin rushes to the system, seeing that they have been breached. They both escape through the back, and the computers systematically erase and destroy themselves due to the way Inquilin programmed it. They manage to escape in Inquilin's car, but they begin getting shot at by the men pursuing them. Just as they think they've escaped the men, another round of bullets comes, and Inquilin sadly gets shot. Acting quickly, Heller pulls her to the passenger seat and manages to drive them away. Once he gets to a safe point, he stops and sadly looks at Inquilin, who's passed away, kissing her one last time on the forehead. Now truly alone, Heller walks down the street, flashes of Sarah and Inquilin's murder playing through his mind. Afterward, Elish sends a message to Inquilin, stating his interest in missiles she told him about through an encrypted message earlier. Seeing this, Heller purchases a new laptop and begins decoding the location. That night, he sets out on his journey. He arrives at Constanta, Romania, and sends Elish the meetup location. Scanning his face with his phone, he uploads it into another random man's face, and the agency gets the feed that Heller is in Berlin. Little do they know that it's fake Heller. Elish arrives at the location, and instantly, a phone begins ringing on a chair. He picks it up, and Heller answers, telling him to open the case for the missiles. However, what he sees is an IED, and he just armed it by opening the case. It's on a beam trigger, which means that if he drops the lid, moves away, or crosses the beam, it detonates. Heller orders him to look at the photograph of Sarah, telling him about the incident in London. Heller comes out from his spot and asks Elish for information in place of deactivating the device. Elish instantly agrees, and Heller asks for Horst's location. Elish says he's gone, and Heller threatens to leave, but he desperately stops him. He reveals the cafe location he always meets Elish to deliver the missiles, also sharing the way Horst is contacted. When Heller gets Elish's phone and confirms the code names, he begins leaving, telling Elish that he can survive the blast if he jumps fast. Of course, Elish doesn't. At the agency, Caleb realizes they've been played once again by Heller, and he shares the news of Elish's demise in Romania. Heller heads to the location Elish gave him. In a hotel, he hallucinates about Sarah and finds a hidden piece on the puzzle she gifted him. The next morning, Heller goes to the dock where Horst visits and discreetly takes a picture of the boat. However, he runs into the bear in a cafe. He is taken to a seat, making Heller wonder if he's there to assassinate him. The bear isn't there for that, but rather wants to save Heller's life. He gives him the option of living with him, but Heller refuses. His mission isn't complete, and besides, he no longer has a home to go back to since Sarah is gone. Back in his room, he transfers the picture to his system and manages to find Horst's boat. The next morning, he goes back to the dock to ask about the two men who were there, but doesn't get any answers. He heads back to his systems, then goes back to scout at the dock. Unfortunately, he gets hit with the butt of a gun at the back of his head, making him lose consciousness, and his puzzle falls to the ground. Afterward, he is taken to a ship, and finally meets Horst in person. Heller tells him he's come to face his wife's killer, sharing that Sarah mattered. However, he is forced to sit down. Horst explains the situation regarding Sarah, admitting it was necessary for their escape. He feels Heller isn't so different from him, since he's taken down people. Seeing the pattern Heller has been using to take out his victims, Horst tells him that he is not a killer, because it's hard to take a life up close. To prove this point, he hands Heller a gun, urging him to pull the trigger. However, Heller can't, but he tells Horst that he just wanted the same look on his face, like the one that was on Sarah's face before she was shot. He drops the gun and sits, having gotten what he wants. Just then, the ship begins to rumble, and Horst begins to panic. Heller calmly tells him that he's taken control over the ship, and they just moved into Finnish waters. Horst doesn't believe it, since the ship is a vault which the CIA insisted on. But Heller reminds him that it was his encryption they used. Everything is running from his hotel, and Heller just needed his watch and more time to keep Horst talking. Just like a dream, the Finnish Navy and Interpol arrive, and Heller reveals he sent their location. The men are arrested and taken away, including Horst, while Heller steps outside when he says his name. Sometime later, Moore and Caleb are arrested as Heller leaks their dirty files to the public. O'Brien gives a speech about this, and news reporters ask her several questions. Afterwards, Heller pays a visit to Sarah's grave, bringing her fresh flowers. He gets into his car that evening and is surprised to see Henderson. Seems like the man has 9 lives. Henderson thanks him for his actions, shaking him like a brother before leaving the car. Sometime later, Heller finishes fixing the plane Sarah gave him and successfully takes it for a spin. If you've made it to the end, hit the like button, comment, and share. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next recap.